Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome to church. Happy New Year. May it not be half as bad as you fear and twice as good as you hope. That'll do. So today we're starting a brand new series called Donald Trump, Steak, and the Meaning of Life. Over the next few Sundays, as advertised, I'm going to be exploring with you the whole business of whether or not life has any meaning, and if it does, what is it? Our biblical text for this exploration is a disturbingly odd part of the Bible called the Book of Koheleth or Ecclesiastes, depending which tradition you come from. And before I jump into this strange part of the Bible, I want to give you a warning. And I want you to listen very carefully to this warning. Are you listening carefully? This bit of the Bible that I'm going to teach you is different. It is disorienting. It is confusing. Not in the sense that it's going to be hard for you to understand, but in the sense of what it says is, well, you'll see what I mean quite quickly. Let's go. Ecclesiastes, Hebrew Bible, chapter 1, verse 1. The author says that what you're about to read are the words of the teacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. In other words, as you jump into this book that I've written for you, I want you to know that what I am is a teacher. That's what I do. I teach people. People come to me in a state of confusion and bewilderment, desperate for information, and when I give them that information, their lives get better. And notice, please, in this biographical statement, he's not just any teacher, he is a teacher with a definite article. He is the teacher. The teacher who is in fact king in Jerusalem. And so therefore, this is a teacher whose teaching is always informed by a certain biblical worldview. Do you know what I mean? This is a man who knows what Genesis says. This is a man who's conversant in the writings of Moses. This is a teacher who knows what the Bible says and who knows what the Bible means. And so therefore, when you read this opening sentence of his book, you get the immediate expectation that the book that follows will be the kind of biblical wisdom that you're used to. The kind of biblical wisdom that you always thought worked. Do you know what I mean? Work hard, say your prayers, be a good boy, be a good girl, pay your bills on time, show up for work on time, don't do anything naughty, and your life will work out okay. And that's a fair expectation, I think. After all, if I'm going to bother listening to what a teacher has to say, I want that teacher to have something worthwhile to say. And if what he says can make my life better, well, fine. For example, at some point in your life, you've probably seen adverts for the Rich Dad, Poor Dad seminar series. I'm all about that. I think I get what this guy's selling. Come to my seminar and I'll teach you how to invest. Come to my seminar, I'll show you how money works. And what you'll get out of my seminar, if you pay attention, is rich. Sign me up. I'm in. Next slide. This book was popular in church circles for a while. A great book written by a great guy who does great things. The Purpose-Driven Life. So you understand the sales pitch there, don't you? If you buy my book, you'll learn how to inject some purpose into your life. Your life doesn't have to be here and there. It doesn't have to be meaningless. It doesn't have to be aimless or shiftless. You can have purpose and drive and direction of life. Sounds good. Sign me up. Yes, please. And if you're in the book selling, seminar selling business, that's the kind of pitch that you have to pitch. Something that makes life work, that makes life better. So here's the sales pitch of the teacher, the king in Jerusalem. Everything is meaningless. 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 Utterly meaningless. This is a jarring statement. Not quite counterintuitive, but certainly contrary to our beliefs and our wishes. And so the question immediately becomes, in this opening sentence, is what kind of Bible book is this? And who decided this should be in the Bible in the first place? I mean, there are bits of this book that just fill you with emptiness. To hear a man say at the end of his search for meaning that there isn't any makes you wonder whether or not you ought to embrace the sadness that lurks somewhere deep in your soul. The word meaningless that he uses is an ancient Hebrew word, chavel. And chavel is, the closest translation in English would be a vapor. So mist would be chavel. Fog would be chavel. That thing you squirted on your face before you came to church to make you smell pretty would be chavel. Snowfall in April would be chavel. Chavel is something that is here in one moment and then not here in the next. And we understand that bits of life are like this. But this writer says that all of life is chavel. The fact that you are in love is chavel. The fact that you are in debt is chavel. The fact that your home is a happy one is chavel. The fact that your home is an unhappy one is chavel. The fact that your life is going well at the moment is chavel. The fact that you are struggling through life at the moment is chavel. And chavel in the Bible is always negative. This is the disturbing punch of this old wisdom. Everything in life is meaningless. So that's the title of the seminar. I have no idea how this made it past the marketing department, to be honest. But there you go. Then he gets into it. And he says, folks, I did some research to get ready for this seminar I'm teaching you. And the question that my research sought to answer was, what do people gain from all their work, all the days of their life? So that's the question, and I think it's a pretty good one. Every day you do stuff. That stuff is the sum of your life. You know, you work hard, you clean your house, you get your kids off to school, get lunch ready, you keep your boss happy, you keep your customers happy, you do whatever you have to do to make it for yourself and those you love in this world, and who could do better. But at the end of the day, what's the point? What is it worth? What does it matter? That's the question. And before he answers it, he gets into a wee poem. And as all good poems should be, the poem is dark and depressing, because the poem suggests that at the end of the day, there really isn't much point. Everything you do, he says, is ultimately worth, well, nothing. So he says, notice, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. What he's saying here is that the earth upon which we live exhibits some permanence, but we most definitely do not. So as I said last Sunday, in the summer I'm heading over to Scotland for a few weeks, and when I'm in Scotland I always go out to the west coast, to the island of Harris, and the rocks, if you're into geology, I'm not, but if you are, the rocks are really old in Harris. They're some of the oldest rocks in the world, actually, older than the Himalayas. Precambrian, you know, old rocks. And when you walk in the hills of Harris on these ancient rocks, you really are reminded that you are passing through time. And when you look at a landscape that has not changed in tens and hundreds of thousands of years, it really hits you that at best you are completely impermanent, and that whether you loved or not, or lost or not, or won or not, or were happy or not, or sad or not, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter all that much, because you are Chavel. Here today, gone tomorrow. And this is troublesome to the ancient teacher. He goes on and says, the sun rises and sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north, round and round it goes, ever turning to its course. All streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. All this is wearisome, more than one can say. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, there's something new? No. It was here already, long ago, here before our time. So what he's saying here, in a deeply sad way, is that the world in which we live and the history through which we are passing is marked by a continual activity that goes nowhere and achieves nothing. The sun does the same thing. The wind does the same thing. Nations rise, nations fall, walls are built, walls crumble, and on it goes, and it never ends. And my being here at all, with my worries and my struggles and my sadness and my happiness and my love and my loss, doesn't really matter. And so in the next sentence he struggles with this business of impermanence and mortality. No one remembers the former generations. Even those yet to come will not be remembered by them that follow. Think about the truth of that. How often do you visit the grave of your grandparents? Now and again, maybe? How about your great-grandparents? Or your great-great-great-grandparents? Do you even know where they're buried? Do you even care? Does it matter at all in the life you live? And the fact that those people loved and lost, and laughed and danced and cried, or were moral or immoral, or faithful or cheated, or were sad or happy, or knew success or failure, didn't matter, because they're gone and they're forgotten. And so too, the fact that you love and have lost, and have known success and failure and sadness and happiness and morality and immorality and all of those things that make up this life of yours, ultimately do not matter, because one day you too will be gone and forgotten. Not me, of course. I go to the gym. That doesn't matter either. So that's where he's at in his research. And then he tells us something of the methodology he used in his life research, in his dark piece of study. He says, I, the teacher, was king in Jerusalem. What he's saying here is that I'm not some slack-jawed individual who just is going through a bad patch in life. I am a person of fierce faith and fierce intelligence. When I decided to have a look at this meaningless life of ours, I really went after it with belief and with intellect. And so the first thing I did was I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven, and what a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. Probably can't say mankind anymore in Canada. Is that legal now? Okay. Just checking. Okay. Now, normally, the Bible speaks very highly of wisdom. The Bible says things like it's good to be wise, because if you're wise, you know how to live, and if you know how to live, you live well, and you'll have a good life. So what this writer is saying here is he applied his considerable intelligence, and intelligence informed by his faith, to figure out a wisdom for life. And as he does so, notice he's enormously cynical. And this sentence captures his cynicism. It's been sanitized for our English ears, but what this sentence actually says in Hebrew is this: God has given to us all an evil task. On the one hand, we have each been given the improbable and therefore wonderful gift of life. But on the other hand, we are cursed with an inquisitive nature that propels us to search for a meaning that does not exist. He is saying here that we are driven to look for something that just can't be found. And so he says, I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom, and to madness, and to folly. And I learned that everything is chasing after the wind, for with much wisdom comes sorrow, and the more you know, the more you grieve. This is a controversial, depressing, I think, statement. Because in the Bible, as I hinted at earlier, there is acute wisdom that works. That wisdom goes something like this. There are two ways to live. If you live this way and do these things, your life will go well. Your relationships will go well, your health will go well, your finances will go well, your family will go well if you live right. But if you live wrong, your relationships will go wrong, your health will go wrong, your finances will go wrong, your life won't work. So the wiser you live, the better your life will go. The stupider you live, the worse your life will go. And that wisdom kind of works some of the time. But this teacher says, you know what? Honestly, all that stuff sounds great in church. And it sounds great in the classroom or on paper. But trust me, I am the teacher. I have studied this stuff. And it does not work. Sometimes the wiser you are, the harder you fall. And so this, I think, is a biblical wisdom for the rest of us. The rest of us who know what it's like to have done the right thing and gotten wrong results. The rest of us who know what it's like to try as hard as we can, to be as good as we can, and as fair as we can, and as decent as we can, and still have found that life kicks you in the guts anyway. It did not work. Then he gives his students a summary of his research. He says, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. The word test in this sentence is a science word. It means to experiment. So what this teacher is saying is, friends, I had this hunch that life had no meaning. But smart as I am and faith-filled as I am, I didn't want to go out on a hunch, so I did an experiment. And the first thing I experimented on was pleasure. I'm in. I like the word pleasure. I even like the way it sounds. And what I find interesting about this man is, this isn't a man who's getting dressed up and going out on a Saturday night and having a good time. No, it's not. It's more than that. This is a man getting dressed out, going out on a Saturday night and having a good time as an experiment in whether or not life has any meaning. And at the end of his experiment, he concludes, that was meaningless as well. I did the test, the results were negative. What does pleasure accomplish? Implied answer, not a thing. Then he ups the ante a wee bit. He seems to be saying, if going out, getting dressed up on a Saturday night and doing all of the things that I want to do isn't working, then maybe I just need to do those things harder. Maybe maybe if getting drunk doesn't work, I need to drink more. How about that? And so he says, I tried cheering myself with wine. I tried embracing folly, all the while my mind guiding me with wisdom. In other words, I may as well drink to the bottom of the cup to see if there's answers to be found there. After all, life is short. And if I'm here today and gone tomorrow, maybe the theology I ought to embrace is the one that says, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. I mean, that's some kind of thing at least. I'll give that a shot. And maybe that if life is just about squeezing as much pleasure as I can while I'm here, maybe what I need to do is just squeeze a little bit more. Maybe I'm just not squeezing hard enough. And I did that to see what was good for people to do under the heavens during the few days of their lives. Do you get the fatalism of this sentence? We only have a few days. We are Gavel. May as well make the most of them. However, just because he's out doing all that stuff doesn't mean he's a layabout. This is the teacher, remember. This is a sophisticated, cultured, intelligent individual. In his experiment, he then says, I did other stuff too. He says, I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. In the ancient world, particularly the ancient Near East, where civilization came from, gardens were symbols of human ingenuity. This, remember, is the desert. This is a dusty place, scorched by the sun. And in this environment, to create a garden was the pinnacle of what our species could do. You've perhaps heard of these things, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The thinking was that in a horrible environment, I've made for myself something nice, something pleasant. In addition to this, he says, I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves born in my home. I owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold, the treasure of kings. I was so rich I could acquire male and female singers. In other words, in an age before iPhones, I had my own band with me wherever I went. How annoying was he at the gym? Can you imagine life without music? I had it everywhere. I also had a harem, the delights of a man's heart. Then he summarizes all of the stuff he did and got and achieved and won. He says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. And in all this, how would you like that, by the way? Just translate that to where you live. I became greater by far than anyone in Woodbridge before me. I became greater by far than anyone in Toronto before me. No one ever got what I got and did what I did and achieved what I achieved. No one ever got to live like I lived. I won it all. And in all this, notice he says, my wisdom stayed with me. This man is a Soren Kierkegaard, a Hugh Hefner, and a Donald Trump rolled into one. He had it all. Wine, women, song, architecture, viticulture, a well-rounded man. Now in the bits that we just read, you notice that there were lots of gardening words. What did he say? He planted, he watered, he grew, there were trees, things flourished, blah, blah, blah. The only other place in the Bible where words like that appear in a cluster like that are the opening chapters of the book of Genesis. The chapters that talk about Eden, about paradise. It's almost as if what this man was trying to do in his life was create a slice of paradise for himself. And isn't that what we're all trying to do? in our modest little ways. We get some inkling that this life of ours can be hard and cruel and harsh. And by our industry and our wit and our wishes, we do the best that we can to make a slice of paradise for ourselves while we can. However, where Genesis looks at paradise and says, that's awesome, that's amazing. This writer looks at the paradise he made for himself and says it's bad. He says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart not a single pleasure. And my heart took delight in all my work. Yeah, fair enough. And that was the reward for my labor. I made this thing, and in it there was gardens, and there was wine, and there was money, and there was women, and there was song. I had everything that money could buy. And yet, when I surveyed all that my hands had done and all that I had achieved in this life, my conclusion was everything was revel. Nothing more than a chasing after the wind. I had it all, I worked for it all, I won it all, I tried it all, I tasted it all, and I am here to tell you that the morning after I got all the things I could ever want, it was meaningless. So then I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom and madness and folly. So intellectual as he is, he goes back to the library and he hits the books. And he does a bookish study of wisdom versus stupidity. And he says, fair enough, I did see that wisdom is better than stupidity, just as light is better than darkness. After all, the wise have eyes in their heads, while the fool walks in darkness. But at the end, I came to realize that the same fate overtakes them both. So just for a second, we breathe a Christian sigh of relief as he articulates the traditional biblical worldview that being wise is good, because when you're wise, you know how to live, and if you know how to live, you get life right. But then at the end, he realizes that if the wise person and the stupid person both eventually end up as dead, forgotten persons, then what is the ultimate difference between wisdom and stupidity? So he says, what do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless, for the wise, like the fool, will not be long remembered. The days have already come when both are forgotten. Like the fool, the wise too must die. To understand this sentence, you have to understand that in the culture out of which the Bible emerged, there was no clear, articulated theology of life after death or heaven or anything like that. This is old stuff. But what they did believe was that a good reputation lived on after you. There's one Jewish text that says that the human body is a fleeting thing, but a virtuous name will never be blotted out. Have regard for your reputation, since it will outlive you. In the biblical worldview that this man came from, a reputation was everything, since because it lasted after you did. But this teacher, cynical as he is, says, you know what? That's Kool-Aid for the gullible. That's a crock. Only an idiot would believe something like that, because everyone gets forgotten sooner or later. So at this point, he's beginning to realize that there isn't any point. Therefore, he says, I hated life, because all the work that is done under the sun is grievous to me. It's all meaningless. And so my heart began to despair over all my labor under the sun. For a person may work with wisdom and knowledge and skill, and then they must, notice that word must, leave it all to another. This is meaningless and misfortune. What do we get from all our anxious striving with which we work under the sun? What's the bottom line? He concludes. Life isn't worth it. Everything that we are so busy doing today is worth so very little. There is nothing about life, good, bad, sad, or happy, up or down, that matters. It is all meaningless. Because one day we are gone and forgotten like Havel. We are here in a moment and absent in another. Now, having said all of that cheery stuff, the truth is in the twist. This is a Hebrew writer. He's all about getting you to think one way because he really wants you to think another. And here's the other. The take-home message of this dark and very old wisdom is that the very fact that this life of ours doesn't have any meaning at all gives to this life of ours extraordinary meaning. Let me say that again in a slightly different way. Because life has no meaning, that therefore means that every moment of every ordinary day is packed full of meaning. Have a look at this photo. So, this image was taken in 2010 in Chile. And what are we looking at? Yes, so for 70 days, a group of miners were trapped underground in Chile. I've never been trapped underground. I'm saving that till my final journey. But that's kind of what being trapped underground must feel like you're in a tomb. Underground. For 70 days. Trapped in a tomb. And this man, Luis Ursa, was the last of the Chilean miners to be rescued. And I love this image. I love the way, he's punching his fist in the air and he's got that look on his face. What is Mr. Ursa thinking at this moment as he breathes fresh air for the first time in 70 days? I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure he's not thinking about the value of his pension. You know what I mean? Pretty sure he's not thinking about bills he has to pay. Or some trivial dispute he's having with his cousin. Or someone who offended him 2 years ago and now he can't get over it. I'm pretty sure he's thinking about none of those things. I'm pretty sure, and I put money on this, that the only thing this man's thinking in this moment is, it's good to be alive. Life is awesome. Breathing is awesome. Everything is amazing. Life is a gift. Those of you who have been diagnosed with pretty serious illnesses, I think you understand this point better than the rest of us. Remember when you heard those words from the doctor? All of a sudden it hit you that life is precious and amazing, and that every single second of it is to be appreciated and enjoyed. No day should ever go unlived. No moment should ever go unappreciated. And the awareness of all of this impermanence and improbability gives us a way to process the inherent meaninglessness of our existence. It gives us a way to process our depressing mortality. Do you know what most of life is at the end of the day? Most of life, in the view of this Hebrew writer at least, is vapor management. That's it. It's Havel. You are a mist, here today, gone tomorrow, and life is managing that mist. And so you have a choice. You can live as though life was a gift that you've already been given and it's amazing. Or you can live as though life is a thing you'll eventually get when you achieve a certain achievement or get a certain product or reach a certain level. Listen. This might be the truest thing I've ever told you. There will come a day when you won't be here. And so while you are here, you should enjoy it. There'll come a day when you won't have the company of your family and the comforts of your home. There will come a day when you won't be able to have a coffee with your friends or feel the sting of winter upon your skin. There will come a day when the Highland malt will no longer warm your throats. There will come a day when the pleasures and the possibilities of life and love and friendship and parenthood will leave you forever. But this writer would say to you and to me through the centuries that for you, that day is not today. Today you live. And you live best, it seems, by embracing the impermanence of this whole thing. And in so doing, find the enchantments and the wonders and the pleasures and the amazingness of each ordinary moment. I'll give you homework if I may, if you're in the mood. Glad to hear it. Try this. Bring to each moment of your life this week an awareness that a day will come when you will no longer have moments such as these. Tomorrow morning when you drive to that job you hate, stuck in traffic, surrounded by idiots, remember this. One day you won't be able to do that. One day you won't be able to put up with those things, do those things, and deal with those people. Maybe tomorrow, maybe one day you'll remember that tomorrow was the good days. Bring to tomorrow that attitude and see if your drive to work doesn't change. See if your attitude to what you have to do doesn't change. See if the coffee doesn't taste better and the company doesn't feel sweeter and everything doesn't become more satisfying and your heart doesn't become happier and more glad. Life is amazing. Amazing. But only because it doesn't last forever. So stop living like it does. Fair? More of this awesomeness next Sunday. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next week.